Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's wonderful to be here, alhamdulillah. Everything that Sheikh Rizwan was saying, totally on point, totally agree. And I think that my background and experience kind of speaks to what he was talking about. So I went to school to become a teacher. I did my undergrad in math and got my master's in math education. I went on to teach because I got married younger, and so my husband was still in school at that time. So before we had kids or during those first few years, I was working. I worked for 3 years and I took a couple of years off, and then I worked for another 5 years. And then I've been not working for the last 4 years, and not only decided to take a break from work, but also decided to homeschool my kids. In that meantime, I also kind of went down a secondary career path, which was childbirth education. And I'm also a certified doula. So I do birth work, basically support moms through their pregnancy and birth journey while being at home and adjusting, having something or creating a certain type of, something. It's still inside the home, but outside of the home that I can work around the prioritized schedule, which is the schedule of the children. So that's kind of what I do right now. And we can delve more into okay, what was the experience of working? What was the experience of staying at home? Because I know that that's what you were kind of mentioning, is this paradigm that we only tend to feel that sense of fulfillment and worth when we are working outside the house, because that's what our culture prioritizes. Right.
So what was so you mentioned that part of the choice was because your husband was studying, so you were able to work out that role. What were the choices to go into teaching versus the work as doula versus staying at home? What are your priorities? Maybe is there a constant through all of that? Has your mindset changed? That's the life have changed that you a couple of different phases.
I think that there has been changes, but I think that the constancy through everything has been okay, if having a family, and family is a priority, and I think it should be everybody's priority if you're already down that path. So yes, were there years that I worked while I still had the children? Absolutely. But in the back of my mind, did I also feel that maybe the balance was off? The answer is yes. And being at home is a different kind of job, because the reality is that children don't, if your husband is working and busy and your children are your children, they don't always, they're not going to give you accolades. They're not going to always give you that verbal gratitude. Not always, right? Not at the level that maybe you would receive that professionally. And I think that that's where, I don't know, maybe I found more growth, because you are required to look intrinsically. You are required to say, okay, what is really, truly, what does Allah want of me? And who am I trying to prove certain things to? Because it's not the outside world ultimately. And that type of fulfillment is a more superficial fulfillment. Whereas when you're doing something for the higher creator, it's a different type of fulfillment. So it's more difficult, I feel like, to remind yourself of that, again, because nobody's saying it to you verbally all the time. But it's different. And I feel like, I don't know, I suppose I could say I feel more whole, making sure that I am prioritizing what I know I should be prioritizing. I really, truly do. How you said, that we are not, men and women are not equal. And I would never, maybe, people view a mom who stays at home as oh, what do they do all day? But there is so much that goes into it. I think that people do realize that on one hand, but oftentimes don't acknowledge it. I personally would not want the pressure and the weight of being the breadwinner on my shoulders, our husbands have, or our brothers have, to have that in the back, because it is a difference in responsibility. There's nothing that's better or, higher or lower. They are different and they're not the same. And, I think that when we put the societal pressure on ourselves for anything, I honestly truly believe for anything, whether it's, your role as a mother or your role as a wife or your role as a career person, anytime we are taking societal pressures and putting them on ourselves, I think that's where we have to stop and reflect and ask ourselves, is this the right path?
So, as usual, the participants, they can all jump in with questions as they come to your mind. You put your hand up or just unmute yourself. You yourself were homeschooled. Were you homeschooled throughout?
I was homeschooled from first grade to fourth grade. And then we had moved to Chicago from Wisconsin. In that interim, I went to actually Islamic Foundation School from fifth, sixth, seventh, part of eighth. And then I was homeschooled for the rest of basically eighth and ninth. 11th grade, I went to public school for the full time for the whole year. And then I actually graduated I didn't even graduate. I just came out of 11th grade and then went straight into community college at 16. So I don't actually have a high school diploma. So yeah, I put homeschooled on my application, took the ACTs, which that's what everyone was taking at that time. And, took the first year of classes at a tech school and then transferred into a 4-year university for the rest of it.
So I know we have several homeschoolers amongst you all as well. So I don't know if you have questions about that kind of thing as well, because it is kind of, I know some of you are going kind of fluidly through, and Musa, you've already jumped into community college, and maybe Masuma, I think you're also doing something like that as well. So there's a perception, I think, in the community that homeschooling creates introversion and social awkwardness and those kinds of things. And obviously, it's not like, how do you respond to that?
If you're socially awkward to begin with, it doesn't matter if you're homeschooled or you go to school, you're always going to be socially awkward. And if you're an extrovert and you know how to communicate, or you have better communication skills, then that's going to be there whether you're homeschooled or you're not homeschooled. That's my take on it. Most homeschoolers do not ever operate within an isolated bubble. They always interact with other homeschoolers, because it's difficult for parents to homeschool too. And we are always looking for other parents to be able to connect with. So I do see a couple of hands up.
Yeah. Musa?
So I did something similar where I did high school at a community college. But you mentioned that you didn't get a high school diploma. Is that because, did you do a dual enrollment type of situation where you did high school at the community college and then moved to a 4-year university, or did you just do your 4-year or 2-year degree at a community college and just skip high school altogether?
Yeah, so it was honestly, it was a strange mix. So like I said, 11th grade, I was in a high school, public high school full time. They did have, the district itself had dual enrollment. And so for the year after that, we did the dual enrollment through the high school, but I wasn't taking any classes there. But I still, even though it was technically 11th grade for me, I still didn't have enough credits to graduate from high school. So that basically that first year was dual credit. So the district paid for it. And then after that, again, like I said, it was just a matter of ACTs, because even the 4-year schools, their application age, I think, as far as I know, was less than 18. It was either 16 or 17. And so it was partially dual enrollment. And then it was partially just okay, I'm going to call myself a homeschooler now and just apply to college.
When you go through high school like that, do you feel like you miss out on that kind of cohort and some of the culture, or I don't know, any of the aspects of a kind of regular high school career?
I don't know if I experienced it fully enough, because we moved around so much during that time that even when I was that 1 year I was in high school, it was all with people I didn't know. So it was a different experience for me than, a lot of kids who go to middle school and then they go to high school with a lot of the same people and that kind of thing. I mean, I know a lot of people have a wonderful high school experience, but even that 1 year, it's looking back now, it was a year. Okay, I learned certain things from it, probably more things that things, okay, these are the things I don't want to maybe expose my kids to, or those were good lessons, maybe not in the moment, but looking back on it. But I personally, I don't feel like I missed out. I mean, college is a wonderful experience too, so.
Right. Muhammad?
So, Sister Maryam, would you mind sharing where you got your BS from?
Yeah, so I graduated with my Bachelor of Science from, it was a small state school in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. So I started out at Madison, but then my whole family moved to Stevens Point, which is actually where I was born and raised and homeschooled. So we ended up moving back there, and I just transferred and then graduated from there.
Okay, and did you do the rest of your education in Wisconsin as well?
My master's I got in Minnesota because I got married. I got married before I finished my undergrad, had one more semester left. So I stayed in Wisconsin, but my husband got into law school in Minnesota. So we moved there, and then I started my master's after that.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, so I live in the DMV, and so in the DMV, homeschooling, especially in the college level, they accept a lot of like homeschooling degrees and diplomas.
Yep.
So I was wondering, how's the acceptance like that, in Wisconsin or in Minnesota, and do colleges accept that, or is it as widely seen as it is
Yeah,
here?
so I mean, a lot of states do have different homeschooling requirements. Wisconsin and Illinois actually is one of them. Texas, I think, because we lived in Texas, they don't even care what homeschoolers are doing. So I know that there are some people, some states, and it could be based on state requirements. It could be just based on what parents want to do for their kids, and put together that type of diploma and say, these are the classes they've taken, this is their coursework, and here's an official kind of like paperwork for that. In states where, and again, I don't know what they require over there, if that is something that is required, because a lot of times, sometimes it is, but where we were, nothing was required. So it was like, you just put it on your application and nobody is going to question that. And if you have, obviously you still have to write your entrance essay, you still would want to show other things that you have done, volunteer opportunities, or whatever it is that you have that would further who you are as a human being, to show them that you deserve a spot wherever you are applying. So that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
We can go back to this sentiment that you mentioned. I also mentioned like people put value on the career and the money making part of our lives. How do you respond to that? Do you ever get that kind of or feel like you have to defend choosing to stay at home, that it's not just like I'm a kind of just a housewife or just a homemaker or just taking care of the family? Do you feel like you have to kind of defend that? How do you deal with that dynamic, or do you ever face that from outsiders?
Not really to that extent. I know there are some people who, okay, so the reality is that we do kind of live in a society where sometimes, depending on what the situation is that maybe both spouses have to work, right? And so again, we were in that situation for the first few years of our marriage. But that's fine. But I definitely think that there are some people, and these are actually the people I feel like I justify myself to more, who don't believe that, like other women who don't necessarily believe that it should be like that it should be 50-50 husband and wife for both things, both for money making and for house responsibilities, which is fine. Because when we say house responsibilities, it doesn't mean that, when my husband comes home, he's just going to sit down, put his feet up on the couch and allow me or make me do every single thing that there is to be done. But at the same time, if you are going to take the step to commit to have a child or children, they have to be the priority. And it's interesting because I actually my husband's brother, and so my husband is a convert, his brother is not a Muslim, his wife is educated, worked a lot, had children a little later into her 30s, and she's a stay-at-home mom, and both of her kids are old enough, they're in grade school, and he is the one who has requested that she stay at home because he wants to make sure that there's always someone there if the kids need them, if the kids need someone. And to me, that's such a beautiful sentiment, because I don't think I find that in the, if we want to call the American culture. I know we can define that in a lot of ways, but it's such a wonderful sentiment because we don't see that often. Even in our own culture, we have to justify that sometimes. And here we have an example of people who, they get it. You know, maybe their intention is not the intentionality towards Allah or what he has asked us to do, but it's, you know, it's an example of like, okay, they get it, right? There's so much less stress when you know that there is one person who is going to, if the kids get sick, what's going to happen? If, you know, who knows, whatever it is. Now we've chosen to homeschool, so the responsibilities are a little bit extra, but even if the kids were all in school, there's still somebody to take care of them. There's still somebody to maybe have more of a capacity or bandwidth to be able to manage their emotional stress as they go through school or high school or college or whatever it is. Again, not to let dad off the hook for that, but we were built for nurturing, right? In a different way. Dads can nurture too in their own way, but the way that a mother nurtures is different. So
how is it different?
I think that you know, and of course, like everybody is going to have individual experiences, and I definitely don't want to generalize, so I'll only speak to my experience. I think that from my experience, mothers will always, okay, if there's like the last piece of cake, a mother will always make sure that all the kids get an equal share. If a dad is in my experience, if dad comes in and sees the piece of cake, he's going to eat it. That's just like the most basic example that I can give you, if that illustrates that on a bigger level. So that's again, not to generalize, but in my individual experience. So that type of nurturing, that, like, you know, I will stay up with you. I will, again, I know there are dads who do that, but you know, in our dynamic, I want that to be my responsibility. Even if I'm working, I want that to be my responsibility. Because I just feel like it's something I would like to take upon myself. So,
Musa?
So I just had a question going back to when you were talking about your high school and undergrad. You said you, after 11th grade, you went straight to a community college. Did any of your courses from community college transfer to your bachelor's degree, either as electives or as base level requirements?
That's a super good question. So, you know, I know we put a lot of kind of not pressure, but we try to like know what we want to do for the rest of our lives in high school. And I'm not sure if that always works. So that was kind of me. I just kind of was taking a whole bunch of different things before I really decided what my major was. So if you count from like when I actually started college, which was when I was about 17, until I graduated from it was about 5 years. So I took an extra year because I truly kind of just hopped around. So the short answer is yes, they transferred. The long answer is when I chose my major, I didn't need half the credits because I ended up with a Bachelor of Science, but I had taken like, I can't remember, like 20 credits of Arabic as a language, right? And I maybe needed 4, but I took so much language. I took multiple like literature classes that I didn't need for my Bachelor of Science. Am I happy that I took them? Absolutely. But yeah, so they transfer. It's just that if you don't already have a path picked out, some of them just may not like count for your degree credits. If that makes sense.
That situation of not knowing and having the pressure to know what your path is going to be, I think that's a general theme for at least many of the participants, and I think maybe it's across the board. Mm-hmm. So how, like, I don't know, what advice, do you have any wisdom that you've gained through that for how they should deal with that whole problem of life? And
yeah, I mean, I think that if you know and you have a certain interest path, I think you should definitely follow it. many times the reason that I think that we're confused is because we maybe know where our passions lie, but then we get outside pressure for what might be more prestigious or what might look better or sound better. So I think a lot of times we're maybe not super confused, but I think that somewhere along the way, even if you truly don't know what you're going to do, somewhere along the way, you will find inspiration if you're open to it. If you are, I feel like if you are kind of more rigid in your thinking, if you truly don't know what you want to do, then that's where, I mean, I've seen people kind of go through and get a degree that maybe they don't end up using, and they find a job that they're passionate about, but didn't actually have anything to do with the degree that they got. So if you truly don't know, what you want to do, or you kind of know where your passions lie, and I understand that for especially for boys, there's a different type of pressure than there is for girls, right? And I would say, like, find what you like to do and then create a way. You can always, I think talking to people is a wonderful way to realize there's so many careers out there that we have no idea even exist, little things, little like corners that people have these expertise in that we would never even think of. And it's just a matter of getting yourself exposed to it and knowing where you're at. So like, if you're somebody who loves art, okay, you may not go get an art degree and be able to do much with it, but you can find a way to use that passion in something you may not have thought. You're right, something a little more outside the box. Or if you like writing, but you also like science, you could become write books about specific topics or do science research, and then be able to be the one who can communicate those ideas from the scientists who maybe don't have the communication skills or the writing skills to the outside world. So I just, there's always a way to kind of find that path or that avenue. But I do feel like if you're not sure, I feel like that is what the first year of college should be. Is take a lab science, take a literature class, take a political science class, take a psychology class, and see, okay, they may not all count as your major degree, but every experience that we have creates the person that we are.
I think given that, so I think we're on the same page that women and men are different, and so college education also will probably look very different. So how should girls think about college if they're if the path you've taken resonates with them?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that you should still pick a path that you are passionate and that you can possibly make a career with. There's nothing inherently, it doesn't have to be like either this or that. Like, have to be a stay-at-home mom, so I'm just gonna who cares about what I choose for my career or for my university path or my career path? Because at some point, depending on how you structure your family or your married life or whatever it is, I mean, my kids are not going to be in my care forever, right? They're an amanat and they're not going to be with me forever. And so then what do I do, right? We still want to be productive, contributing members of society. And so choosing a career path that, or maybe thinking about something that will allow for, I know a lot of moms are, the reason that they won't stay at home is because if they take a break in their career, it looks bad on a resume. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, there can always be a way where you can still stay connected, but be home, or stay connected in a very minimal way just to stay connected. It shouldn't be all or not. I wouldn't ever say, your place is in the home, so don't get an education. But I think still finding something, it's just that you don't have the stress of making sure that it's going to be able to, provide the bread and butter for your family.
Right. How important is your education in taking care of your kids?
I mean, there's that too, but, if I think back to my own homeschooling education, which honestly, out of K through 12 were the best years of my life, my mom didn't have an undergrad degree. My mom graduated with her undergraduate degree the semester before I did. So, and then of course she got her master's, however many years after that. So because we think of education as what degree we have in our hand, but we can be educated on a very, in a very different way, by experiences, by reading, by, travel, or just having our eyes open to different things, by asking questions and meeting people. So I don't think that, if that's what you're asking me, is that, does your value as a mother increase if you have a certain, level of education, a bachelor's, a PhD, a master's? No. I mean, the passion that you put into motherhood is a completely different thing. And yeah, that's my take on it.
I had another question in my mind. I just drew a blank. And jump in if any of you have anything in your mind. Yeah, I totally drew a blank. As you were talking, something came to my mind.
I know that I do know that, I know we're talking about like stay-at-home moms and stuff like that, but there's always also, I feel like recently, maybe just talking to certain people, there's also the conversation of like, should a girl, or even for boys, I guess, as well, but like, I have heard from a lot of people when I was younger, make sure that you have a stable career before you get married, or make sure that you can be financially stable before you get married, just in case something happens. And I don't subscribe to that school of thought. Actually, I think that we are created for companionship, and I think that I actually focused much better I was a few years older, that's true too, but I feel like I focused much better being married and going to school and having that stability of saying, okay, yes, this is my life. Not just, of course, I had stability with my own parents as well. But we kind of get to that age, right, where it's like, okay, we're thinking about this, but we're also in school. And my husband too, he got his full law degree and a master's degree after that, after getting married. I think we even had, one child when he graduated from law school, and I finished my master's degree the month before I had my second baby. So truly anything is possible. Would I absolutely do it again that way? I don't know. I really wanted to have the family, but I also wanted to just finish with that part of that education part of my life. So we just kind of bit the bullet and did it. But it really depends a lot on what your structure is, and who do you have around to support you, and all of those things as well.
Yeah, so how did you think about marriage as you were going through, like, when did you kind of decide to get married or want to get married? Did you have kind of a clear idea, or it happened?
Yeah, I mean, I know everybody is different, but for me, I mean, I had the desire to start that process, I would say, at a younger age, maybe like, 19, 20. I did get married at I think it was a couple weeks after I turned 21. So like I said, it was before I was done with my undergraduate degree, made it work. It was all fine. But again, like the emotional stability that I felt after was vastly different than, however many years of undergrad that I went through, kind of after feeling that desire that, okay, yes, I would like to settle down. I would like to look for companionship, obviously in a different way than you would have with your parents and your siblings, and that type of life. So
can you explain that more? Because I think many times people have in mind that if you get married while you're in college, it's a distraction, and now you can't focus on this because you're focused on family. But it sounds like you're saying that actually it brought stability, or like it created a new kind of stability or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I wonder though, if people are distorting the idea of looking for a spouse versus actually getting married with, that kind of thing. If we are, or maybe even looking for a spouse, maybe not in the right avenues. Like we think of like, oh, I'm going to get emotionally attached, and then what if something doesn't happen? But if we are truly, again, it's much easier said than done. I understand that. But if we are looking for a spouse based on what Allah has prescribed us to look for in a spouse, it's like many times a person will either fit the bill or not fit the bill. oftentimes we overlook that stuff and we focus more on the superficial. We get attached to the superficial, and then that's where our emotional issues come in. So I wonder sometimes when people say that it's more of a distraction, it's that process that's more of the distraction than the actual being in the actual marriage, because it was not. Yeah, that's what I think. People are kind of distort those two experiences.
All right, so that's separating maybe, okay. But then once, like, can you speak to your own experience? Like once you were married and you're both studying, how did that work?
It worked out
work, and then also, yeah, just like balancing your marital life versus independent like studies, each of your own paths of study.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of both went into it with the understanding that, hey, listen, like law school is very difficult and it's a lot of time studying. We set ourselves up so that we lived very close to the campus that he was going to school at. And so I would oftentimes just like, I would take dinner and go over there, and he would still be studying till like 8-9 p.m. And, you know, if I had my own schoolwork to do, or during one of the semesters I was working myself, so I would bring my grading and just sit there and do it. Complete silence, but we're still together. He's still in his own studying environment. And that worked out very, very well for us. Even when he went to do his master's was like a night program. So it was like, you know, if you know, if he had to be home during the day with we only had one kid at that time, but if he had to be home, he could be home. And it was just, was it a difficult 5 years? Absolutely. You know, but I do feel like oftentimes it's the struggles and the challenges that you go through together that really create the lasting relationship, if you can learn how to communicate and get through those things. And so, you know, alhamdulillah, it worked out well for us, understanding that like that person will have this commitment for this many years, and these are things he has to do, these are the things I have to do, and then maximizing on time that we did have off and that we could spend together.
If you're comfortable speaking about the finances, like how did that work? Did your parents continue to support you, or you were able to find it?
So yeah, so we finance wise, when we got married, our parents kind of supported us in the sense that they gave us a little bit of down payment to get a house. And that's as much as we kind of needed, because I was working. We both had a little bit of money, enough to get us through the times where we were both in school. But like, again, he was either doing, like, he would do a part-time internship, or he would work during the summer when he was off. And then like, even through my master's, again, I had enough money saved up on my own that I paid for the master's fully. So there wasn't any debt there. Again, that was a long time ago, so the prices are very different now. I don't know if I could have been in that situation and paid for it all the way the prices that, you know, tuition prices are now. But like I said, for a few of those years, I was the one carrying the insurance, working through the public school system. And kind of, I mean, his was the supplemental income and mine was the main income. So, and that was the agreed upon arrangement, right? And that worked for us. And then as soon as he got a job, when he was done with his master's, I took a break from work. So.
Did you all negotiate these things before marriage, or?
Yeah, so I don't know. Some of you have met my father. Some of you know him, some of you don't.
We actually had him on for one of these sessions early on as well. So,
okay.
Nice talking, Uncle.
Yes. So he loves finances. I don't know if he said anything about finances when he was on here. He didn't. You should have him back for finances. But he did make Brad create a spreadsheet before he actually gave, you know, the formal permission that, yes, you can marry my daughter, because he believed that, okay, if she's living at a certain standard, he should be able to provide that. And he, knowing that you're going to be in school for at least 3 years, how are you going to provide for her? And that's very commendable on my father's part. But I was not of the heart that like, okay, well, my parents have put me in this many square foot house, you have to put me in double that, right? Of course not. It's two people, we're both students, live the student life, right? So he actually made Brad put together a spreadsheet, and alhamdulillah, Brad is good at spreadsheets, and he had planned ahead for that. So he was able to map out those 3 years. That's, I don't know what would have happened if the spreadsheet wasn't to my father's satisfaction. I think we would still be married, but you know, it was the effort that counted, I think. So.
But then after marriage, I'm sure there's a lot of negotiation over these things. So you were able to just kind of figure these out and
Yeah.
go back and forth.
Yeah, we didn't spend on much, I think, is the main thing. We were totally happy with, you know, secondhand furniture. We bought a couple IKEA sofas and maybe like one bed. The bed we still have, and it's like 16, 17 years later. The furniture, I think I had donated it to like the Al-Hadi school in Houston. They were putting together a library, so I donated the couches. So I don't know if they're still there, but donated the couches to that library. But everything else we had was literally like his parents had an old dining room table in their basement. I was like, yeah, why not? He had old dishes from college. We had a friend who had you know, unfortunately passed away, but she had all this kitchen stuff, and her daughters lived overseas, and they're like, we don't want any of this. And so I literally I was using a blender from probably the 70s until about 2 months ago, when the jar cracked and I just couldn't find a replacement jar. So, you know, it's like, how do we, and that should stay true no matter if it's your first year of marriage or your 20th year of marriage. Like when it comes to those kinds of things and keeping financial happiness, it's like, what do we need? And how can we live within our means? And I think that a lot of times we live outside our means because that's what the societal pressure tells us to do, to have these things for the sake of what everyone else is going to say or think, or what you can tell people, or, you know, kind of communicate without actually saying anything. And I think that that's a lot of times where the downfall is, when it comes to finances in general, not just like, you know, relationships, but finances is a big issue that does come up in relationships. So yeah, so alhamdulillah, we're able to avoid a lot of that by being content to be just together, you know.
Would you recommend your children to marry early in college or high school? Is that's something you're working towards with?
I think that I'm happy to entertain any thoughts of that as soon as they express that to me. I think that my parents were very nervous about that when I first expressed it, because I was younger. Of course, like I also knew I was young, so I didn't really expect it, but I had just I think I probably expressed the desire to get married maybe around 18. And so, yeah, I feel like if the desires, everybody's built differently, you know, but I feel like if a child is given open communication to say, this is when I'm ready, then for sure.
What was the conversation? What were the conversations like? Because I think that's maybe one of the challenges. If you have parents who are communicative and kind of ahead of the game, then they might be the one to proactively broach the subject. But if the child is the one who is in the, you know, has the emotional need, has the you know, kind of all the needs for marriage. The parents are removed. They can think vicariously what it was like at that time and kind of those kinds of things. But I don't know, how do they start the conversation?
You know, I mean, I think, like, looking back, if I put myself in my parents' position, I think it is a scary prospect to say, okay, I have an 18-year-old who wants to go off and you know, live their own life. But at the same time, if we're talking about like just like independence, I mean, kids go off at 18 for college all the time. Would I rather not send them off maybe with somebody who, you know, will take care of them and those kinds of things? But again, I think it comes down to what we're basing our marriage standards on, right? So if I'm 18 and my father says, okay, listen, she has to be marrying somebody who can provide everything for her at 18, unless I'm going to marry somebody who's like, I don't know, many years older than me, like at least 7, 8 years old, which is obviously not a problem at all if it's the right person. That's what you're saying. You're saying anybody between the ages of now 18 and 22 is off limits because they can't provide at the same level. And that's not something that my dad also was of the mindset that like you should finish school. So, and again, I completely understand, like a parent our number one job is to take care of our children. And it's hard to know. Sometimes it's hard to know, okay, what is triggering this? We didn't have a lot of those conversations, but I feel like alhamdulillah, like, especially as our generations kind of grow up in a different society in a different way, we know what conversations to have with our kids. So saying, okay, well, what is the reason that you feel like you want to get married? What are you looking for in a wife? And just testing that water to see, do they have the maturity to be able to handle a relationship? If it's going to be like, I want to get married so that I can have my own life and not have to live with you guys anymore. Okay, well, that's not a good enough reason. Do you know what I mean? So, or what are you looking for in a wife? I want someone who's this height, this skin color. You're not ready. You're not ready, my friend. So I think it's important for us to be thinking about like, what questions are we asking? So there is a question in the chat that was sent to me. It said, actually, no, maybe I miss, you can message me back again, but maybe I misinterpret. I'm not older. My husband is older no, he is older. Maybe I made that not very clear. So when we got married, he was between undergrad and law school. He had taken a year off after undergrad. So he's about 3.5 years older than me. So I can't unfortunately speak to that. How would it, because the question has to do with how is it being the older one in marriage? Because usually,
I think you said something about older, and
sorry.
I knew the dynamics were.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I mean, I was working maybe working first, but that's only because I didn't go through 3 years of law school and then 2 years of an MBA program, which is what he did.
So that's one dynamic. Like, so the idea of the kind of emasculation, if you're like, how did that work? Was there ever a tension that you're earning and he's studying, that you're kind of more the man than he is? Like, was he strong enough for that, or you guys? How did you work through that kind of dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, it's the way you treat each other. That's more of the, like, if I'm going to constantly bring up the fact that, oh, I'm the one earning the money, I'm the one carrying the insurance. What are you doing? How long are you going to be in school? Those are the kinds of things that are emasculating. I feel like now he is still the leader of the family, right? He's still gonna decide, okay, should we move to this place or should we move to that place? Let's talk about it together, but still kind of be the leader of the family. He still had that position, right? So it's only an issue if we make it an issue. And sometimes I think that really depends on the attitudes of, maybe it's the attitude of on the woman's part, right? Because we have a lot of chatter and talk about feminism, a lot of that kind of stuff where we should be the same and we should be equals and we should have the same rights and the same this and the same that. But I think if we were really given all of that responsibility and all those rights, as we want to call them, I don't think necessarily we'd be happy about that kind of thing. So for me, it's like, okay, this is temporary, right? We agree this is temporary. So it was just like, okay, I'm waiting. I'm doing what I need to do until you're ready to take over. So it was like almost just like a placeholder for the position that he was going to step into. And if I had been maybe bitter about it, maybe I would have made the comments that would start to feel like, he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, but it was never that dynamic, right? And so I think that's like attitude and mindset is everything. And if we feel a certain way, then that's going to come out. And so again, it really depends on what are your intentions going into the marriage? Because if they're not always true, and of course, like we're always going to have issues, we're always going to be not perfect or not do things for the perfect or most ideal reasons. But ultimately ultimately that's what the relationship has to be built on, mutual belief, trust, faith in Allah, and what he wants us to do in order to further our lives.
So he was a convert, and if I remember right, he converted, kind of soon before you got married. It wasn't like he was a long-time convert. I think that would probably be a more likely scenario for many of the young people now, that there's more likelihood that they'll end up marrying a convert. I don't know how was that. He was probably behind the curve, behind your level of Islamic knowledge. So how did that work? And I don't know, what was the dynamic like?
Yeah, so I mean, when we met, he started asking questions about Islam, and then I kind of I know my religion, I have my conviction, but I don't really think that I know it in a way to be able to inspire somebody else. But again, if any of you have ever met my mother, she is one of those people. And so I just said, hey, listen, my mom knows a lot. You can just go and she'll answer any questions that you have. And I think partially because we grew up in such a small town, and we were in such a small town for so long, where like we were oftentimes the only Muslim family, all of our dealings and interactions were with non-Muslims. So to them, it was just like, oh, it's another person coming through the door and asking questions about Islam. It really wasn't that big of a deal. And so I think it was like our timeline, like Shirzan mentioned, it was pretty quick. I think we had met in like August. He converted in January. I think he took his shahada, and then we were married by July. So, but
they kind of school him, like did they require him, like you had family circles or something like that where he would participate?
We used to do Quran study. Yeah, we used to do Quran study, and he used to present. My grandfather was also there, kind of guiding him and giving him lessons and teaching him about everything from like Islamic history to basic things about taharat and that kind of thing, right? Because all those things were not conversations that I was going to have, especially not at that stage of like us knowing. We worked together for a short while, and so that was not something I was going to do. So then in that case, now you have this person in front of you. You've taught him what you've taught him, and had all the conversations with, speaking of my parents, they are the best judges of his conviction or no conviction, right? For the religion. So, if we're going to bring this up and say, yes, there's interest now, and they are okay with that, then that, for me, that was a big deal. And especially, again, like I said, I don't know what the experience is converting in a larger community, but he's literally converting with it was like us and my cousin's family living in this town with no other Muslims. So I don't know I will never live in those shoes. And I can't imagine how difficult it would have been for him to change a lot of, or maybe it was easy, right? Because once you have the conviction that Allah puts it in your heart, then I'm sure it is easy from that perspective. But maybe difficult for his parents or his, the people around him who he's like, now he's changing habits. He's not going to hang out and, go out for drinks or whatever the case was, whatever, lifestyle he lived before that. So so that was my experience with that. And there were people who were like, are you sure? You should question his intentions. Is he converting just for the sake of marriage? And again, that's where kind of the trust in my parents came in, is that like, okay, if they are saying that they see the conviction in him, even if I am, blind to certain things, then I am going to trust what they're saying. So.
What's that?
I just had a question about his when he converted to Islam and when you guys got married, were his parents open to that, or were they kind of hesitant, or did they have concerns about him marrying either a Muslim or converting to Islam?
Yeah, so alhamdulillah, like that path, I know a lot of converts kind of have a lot of difficulties with that, but alhamdulillah, like his parents were more of like, if you're happy, we're happy kind of thing. And I think it was also the fact that my parents also really bridged that gap between, because a lot of times I think it's like, we don't know how to treat someone who's not Muslim. Like if, we're all sitting and somebody who's not Muslim walks into the masjid, let's say, we don't always know how to communicate with them because we feel like we're on a completely different wavelength. We come from different worlds. We're all living in the same place, but we come from different worlds. And again, attesting to the fact that my parents were in this tiny town for so many years, it was really nothing for them. And I think that them being able to like extend that not an olive branch, because there was no fighting, right? It wasn't like making peace with each other, but really welcoming them and saying, hey, listen, like we're really not that different. We're going to take care of your son. You're going to take care of our daughter. It's all good. That kind of thing. I know one thing that he tells people, his grandmother on his dad's side was very Catholic. And so she was kind of the one he was afraid to kind of say, okay, hey, listen, grandma, I'm Muslim. But she told him that having a grandson who is actually, dedicated to his religion and his God is better than having one who doesn't have a religion and have a God. So she also, even though she was a very like, I don't want to say, I don't know what old school Catholic means, but, very Catholic, she was even open to this idea because she's just like, at least he's following a faith and believing in God. So, and I know not everybody is fortunate enough to have that type of situation. Were there hiccups? Absolutely. There's, you know what though, even if you're perfect on paper and everybody has the same culture and same religion, listen, it's not perfect. So that's life, and that's marriage, and that's relationships in general. So.
Could you speak a little bit about the doula and the kind of the latest field that you've got into?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's
what is the word actually? Is it an acronym or a different language?
No, it's not. I look it up all the time and I always forget. It's basically just a support person. So there are birth doulas, who help literally support moms through the process of birth itself, so labor and delivery. There are postpartum doulas, they are people who support mom through postpartum. So they'll you can hire a postpartum doula that will come and do your laundry, do your dishes, cook for you if you want them to, hold the baby. You can hire them overnight. You can hire them for 6 hours a day, whatever it is that you feel like you need. And it's almost crazy that we have this, because the reason I feel like that doulas are more and more popular nowadays is because we don't live in the close-knit, close-knit families that we used to. Because back then you didn't need it. You don't need a doula if you got 5 aunts and 3 cousins and a mother and a mother-in-law and all these people, especially women, if you're a new mother, around you. You just didn't really need it. So I think it's sounds like they've been around in a very informal way, but I think it's more formal now because people live such what's the word I want to use? Nuclear lives. It's just me and my husband, and everybody else is maybe even overseas or living across the country and working and can't take time off. There are actually death doulas too that come through and support a person and their family, as they're close to dying and passing away. There are death doulas as well. So I do the teaching, right? I am a teacher. I feel like teaching is in my blood. I love teaching. So that I started with the childbirth education. It's actually like an Islam-based childbirth education course where we pull different ayahs from the Quran and just kind of teach women that this is not something to be afraid of. This is what Allah created us for, this beautiful, miraculous, empowering experience, and use your belief in Islam and your faith in God to get you through this process and to allow the process to happen naturally. So it's like a full 10-week course, hadith and Quranic ayahs and all this stuff. And of course, science, all the science behind, okay, what's your body going to go through, or what are your emotions going to be like, everything from top to bottom, start to finish. So.
The 10-week course is what you studied, or this is what you teach?
That's what I teach. Yeah. It doesn't have to be 10 weeks, but it's 10 sessions worth of information that we go through with parents. And then the doula part is separate. So I teach people all across the country. But the doula work I do locally, because usually you want to be in person to support that mom when she goes into labor.
What made you choose this?
I don't know. I think I've been passionate about birth for a long time. I think it just kind of crept up on me, and I don't think I'd ever take it like people are like, oh, are you, is the next step midwifery, right? Because a lot of times doulas or childbirth educators will go into midwifery after that and actually deliver the babies. For me, I think that like I just get too emotionally invested, and to be like, it's like being a doctor, right? You kind of have to be disconnected because you can have bad outcomes, right? Things can happen, things can go wrong. That's kind of the way that nature and life goes sometimes. And I don't think I'd be able to handle like you have two lives in your hands, literally, right? Mom and baby. So I think that's probably a step I wouldn't take. But I think I've always kind of underneath, I was very passionate of like, I was excited to be pregnant when I got pregnant with all of my kids. I was not to say that I was excited to like go through labor, but I understood myself that, hey, listen, this is a natural process and it's not something to be afraid of. So I just want to like bring that to other people because, when we talk about, and I think it's a parallel to what we talk about, like, what are the societal norms that are put on women when it comes to career, but what are the medical norms that are put on women when it comes to pregnancy and labor and birth? And is that the way that Allah meant it to be? Is that even the healthiest way for it to be? Same with career. Is that the healthiest way for it to be for the society as a whole to thrive? So I think that they're kind of almost parallel conversations. The difference between a doula and a midwife. So a doula will just give emotional and physical support during labor and birth. A midwife will do all, like just exactly what like an OB would do. They do all the prenatal care from the beginning of pregnancy, all the way until like a 6-week postpartum checkup. So they are I don't want to say, we'll use the word holistic. I don't know exactly what term to give it, but basically the same as an OB, but not trained surgeons. They are trained in the physiological process of birth, whereas like an OB would be trained in more of the surgical or what if something goes wrong aspect of birth, labor and birth, or pregnancy and birth.
Asana?
How did you hear about the doula like career? How did you hear about it?
So childbirth education has been around for a while. And like I said, I feel like doula is not up and coming, but is more of a recent thing just because in the last, I don't know, maybe couple generations, right? We live lives where we don't live around a lot of extended family. But so all 3 of my kids were born with a midwife. And so that was kind of like my circle. And I had a friend in Texas. We used to live in Texas. She was a Muslim convert also, and she had her own birth center and she was a midwife. And I've had a few experiences just like off the cuff before I even decided this, that kind of like, I feel like, again, sometimes Allah pushes us in a certain direction when we don't even realize, what that direction is. But I had a good friend who was having a home birth. She invited me to come, and she had a doula there, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, and she's like, yeah, my doula. So many people who have doulas say like, my doula got me through that, got me through labor, because it's scary. Right? Like it's not meant to be an easy process. It's meant to be hard. If you read the ayahs in the Quran about, Bibi Maryam giving birth, she says, would that would have been dust, right? Like even she is saying this. It's meant to be difficult, and we sacrifice a lot, and there's a reason that Jannat is under the feet of the mother. There's a reason why after Allah, it's your mother so many times, and then your father. So, I watched that doula, I watched that midwife. My mom also actually had a home birth for my youngest brother, who's a lot younger than me. So I was present for that as well. So like that kind of everything to do with pregnancy and birth kind of has always been a little bit inspirational. Maybe I just didn't realize it. When I was pregnant with my 3rd son, I read a book by this lady who created this whole Islamic curriculum. And then when I stopped working a couple of years ago, and I was home with the kids, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll look into this. This seems like a really nice thing where you can connect with other mothers. Something that I could definitely do from home. And so I think it was It's 2023 right now. 2021, I think, is when I got certified. So I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but I love it.
Yeah. So the passion is clear. What about the finances? How does it pay well?
I mean, you could be a full-time doula. So if you like just look up a doula, most doula packages start at about like $850 per mom. That's like for a basic package, like for one prenatal, one postnatal, and like 12 hours of labor. And if you go above 12 hours of labor, then it's like an hourly rate. Or if you want 2 prenatal or 2 postnatal, then like the prices go up. I think they go up to like $1,500. Depends on your area, but that's about the average. So like if you were a full-time doula, like full-time meaning like you have a mom scheduled like a due date every week of the month, which I don't even know how you'd handle that. That's great. You know, you could definitely, as long as you conduct yourself so that you don't have any burnout, because it's a very emotionally taxing job to support a mom through that. It's not an easy thing. Usually you're like going to be up through the night and all of that stuff. You have to be on. You have to be on the whole time. So if there are people, like there are people out there who do it, a lot of times they'll have like a backup doula they work with just in case. And so the people who do it full time definitely can make a career out of it. I definitely don't. I have never had moms closer than like 2-3 months apart because I know that's my capacity. So the teaching is overlapping and constantly going. I'll have like 2-3 moms at a time. But the doula work, I got to reset. I need some time to reset before I go in again.
How much is virtual? How much is in person?
So, the virtual, you mean the doula work or the classes?
Yeah, the doula work that you're doing.
No, I don't do any virtual doula work.
Oh,
there are virtual doulas, but I only do doulas for people who are local. So, I mean, like, you know, I feel like, okay, my experience is limited. So those people who are charging like $850 plus might have a few years on me, you know, might have done like 100 moms. So it's like one of those things, like pay scale goes up as you get more experience and all that. So like, I think the last client I charged like 600. Okay. So, you know, I've had, I think 4 or 5 moms so far that have done the doula work for, but about 20-25 that I've done classes for. So, yep.
All right. Well, our time is up. Yeah, thank you so much. This is really amazing. I wanted to ask you more about feminism because you kind of, I'm kind of torn whether to go over. Can I just ask you, because you spoke kind of critically of feminism and yeah, what do you? It's a huge trend and kind of like the dominant part of our culture.
Yeah. You know, and it definitely is polarizing, and that's fine. Like everybody's entitled to what their belief is. I do think it's like, well, can we justify that if we are calling ourselves Muslim? Can we justify that based on the practices that were exhibited, practices and behaviors that were exhibited by the women, let's say of the Ahlul Bayt, if those are our role models? Right. So did they demand to have the exact same roles as their husbands? So that would be question number 1. Did they demand to be able to, for example, like be a part of politics? Did they say we are oppressed because we are not a part of, again, not to say that like women going into politics is a terrible idea and that they should never be allowed. That's not what I'm saying for sure. I'm saying the idea that it makes us equal to a man when we do that, going into it for reasons that are good. You want to make a change in society and your intention is the betterment of that's wonderful. But again, it comes down to like, what is our intention? And like, do we ask for it, but if we were actually handed the sole responsibility of financially taking care of everything that our family has, would we actually want it when it's actually given to us? And maybe there might be people who say yes, but I think that Allah has put an intrinsic nature in all of us. And again, anyone can argue with that, that's fine. But my belief is that Allah has put an intrinsic nature within us. And the more we fight that, the more society is going to fall apart. So So what did Bibi Fatima do? What did Imam Ali do? What did Bibi Khadija do? What did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, do? What were those examples? How did they Bibi Khadija was a businesswoman, but she still did not, let's say, like, usurp the status of what her husband had as like the leader of the family. Like, yeah, he was the leader of Islam and all that. So looking at those examples and then aligning that with what the Western society calls feminism, I don't think you can have both. That's the ultimate argument. You can't believe in both. You can't say both are right because they're not the same. So then you got to pick one. I don't know. Like, again, I don't have a lot of, the philosophical Islamic knowledge, but from what I have gleaned from the way these women held themselves with a lot of respect, what did they do with the honor that they were given? We know them for the mothers that they were. We know them for how high is the status of keeping the stability and peace within the home. I mean, that is a huge deal that we don't give enough credit to. And again, like I said, we fight those things and we want to do things outside of that. And that's where we see society fall apart.
Right. So thank you so much for your time. And we have a captive audience as well. All right, so shall I see you all on Tuesday. Again, thank you so much, Maryam.
Yes, of course. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Walaikum
Assalamu alaikum.
assalam.
Very much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this class.
Oh God, alhamdulillah.